Continue to look into intrapersonal communication. We're going to dive into self concept. Self concept is the image of who we are. It's our subjective description of who we think we are, and it's the image we build for ourselves. So, as we start thinking about intrapersonal communication and even communication in general, I want you to ask the question, who am I? And really dig deep. Do you always answer the same, or does the time and place matter? What are your top answers? Certainly, when I'm at my Navy job and somebody says, "Who are you?" I say, I'm Senior Kirk. On the other hand, if I'm at my mom's workplace, I might say I'm Linda's daughter. Absolutely, these things are going to change as the context and situation does. So we're not just one version of ourselves. We don't even talk similarly. We could talk differently based on context, relationship, location, situations, what I'm wearing at the time. All of these things are going to affect us. So let's kind of break down some of these ideas that belong in self concepts. And you'll find that different textbooks do define this in different ways. Our textbooks defines it as the following three: self-image, self-worth, and the ideal self. So self-image is the mental picture we have of ourselves. When we close our eyes and think of ourselves in the mirror, that is our self-image. That's who we think we are. And it includes things like our roles. Do you see yourself as a nurturer? Do you see yourself as an artist, as an athlete? Our beliefs and our understandings of how others see us. And then there's our self-worth, sometimes known as self-esteem. This is our estimation of our worth, how much we like ourselves, and the good and bad feelings about ourselves, our abilities, and our character. There's a self-worth scale that you can kind of look at and answer these questions to see where you fall on the self-worth scale. And this is also in the textbook. You no longer need to please other people, no matter what happens, no matter what people do or say, and regardless of what happens outside of you, you alone control how you feel about yourself. You have the power to respond to events and circumstances based on your internal sources, resources, and resourcefulness, which are reflective of your true value. And your value comes from inside, from an internal measure that you've set for yourself. And then there's the ideal self. The ideal self is the sky's the limit. This is who I hope to be. As you're sitting here in this class, well, my guess is part of that ideal self is a college graduate. But it's also built on your experiences. It's built on your culture. What does your culture think that you're supposed to be? It's built on other people's expectations. Well, you are supposed to go to college based on your parents' ideas or your guardians' ideas. So all of these things do build this ideal self. And when our self image, self worth, and ideal self overlap, we've got this congruent idea of our self concept. But when there's a mismatch, it can cause distress, and it's our incongruence. And this can affect how we feel about ourselves. And ourselves are very fluid. Another way to kind of look at ourselves is through this lens. And some of these things are very contradictory. There's our perceived self, and this is that reflection of our self esteem and our self image. And then there's the expected self, what other people think that I am. There's the ideal self. This is how I would like to be seen using impression management. And then there's a possible self, the self I'd likely be one day. So the expected self, well, y'all over here might see me like this. I'm a professor, but really, I don't know if I always see myself like that. I know certainly when I'm doing my other job, well, a lot of people see me like this, right? But when I'm home and I'm with the mom and dad, oh, and I'm the baby of the family, trust me, I they see me as a child. They don't see me as a nearly half a century year old person who's traveled the world, right? And then there's my ideal self. This is who I want to be, right? I want to be Xena Warrior Princess. I want to be part of the Defenders. I want to be Jessica Jones and kicking some serious ass, right? And then there's the possible self. This is the self that I might be someday. Someday I might turn into this. This is about the closest I'll get to being Xena. That's what I've decided. So, how do interactions with other people shape our concept? Well, we're going to go over a couple of different theories. We're going to look over the looking glass, reflected appraisal theory, social comparison, and even culture and how culture teachings influence a sense of self. So, the premise of Charles Horton Cooley's 1902 theory was that we see ourselves as others see us. Now, a perfect example of this is me at my folks' house. They still think of me as the youngest child who has the least experience out of everybody in the family. Even though out of everybody in the family, I've traveled farther, I've done more things, I've had more careers, but they still treat me like this child. And to be fair, sometimes I act like a child when I'm with them. This is a prime example of that reflected appraisal theory. The person I present to my family reflect the ways that they categorize me. What about you? Does anybody else have a similar story about the expectations that others put on us and how we might alter the way we communicate with that person? What about if you had an awful boss who treated you poorly? Did you maybe act a little poorly or try to adjust your communication to correct their appraisal of you, even though it may or may not have worked? Another theory that we're going to look at is social comparison. And this is this idea that by comparing ourselves to our peers, you're going to help define who you are, who you want to be, and who you don't want to be. Consider this. We are in high school, we're in college, we get back that essay graded. What's the first thing we want to do? We want to find out how everybody else did. If you got an A, is it because everybody in the class got an A and the teacher's an easy grader? Did you get a D and everybody else got a C until you're just slightly worse than them? Did your best friend get an A and you get a C? All of this stuff is going to affect the way that we see ourselves. And also, if we're doing better than them, perhaps we're going to start to feel a little bit better about ourselves. But of course, what would happen if we judged ourselves against, let's say, Steph Curry? As a basketball player, and I'm comparing myself to Steph Curry, either I'm going to have a very inflated sense of ego, the idea that I could even compare myself to him, or I think of myself as doing awful because Steph Curry is doing all this wonderful stuff. So this is that social comparison. We do it our entire lives. There's keeping up with the Joneses is a cliche, and yet we do this a lot because we want to make sure that we are not falling behind and that we're doing well relatively against other people that we compare ourselves with socially. Even our cultural teachings are going to teach us what's acceptable. And these attitudes are learned at very young ages. There are beliefs, what we define as true and false, and values, which are what is morally right or wrong and good and bad. They can also influence how the self is reflected on the social hierarchy. So this idea of culture, I know that a lot of my Filipino students, they definitely have expectations, especially the women put on them about being child raisers. A lot of times I've been informed that Filipino families, push them into medicine. And all of this is kind of that cultural teaching that's going to affect all these ideas of the self. So culture is really going to teach us and help shape our values. So that kind of begs the questions, what are your values? Now, here's an excellent exercise that I'd love you all to do. I think it's so important. Here's a list of values. Now, this is not all encompassing, and you're welcome to choose other values. But this is what I want you to do, and feel free to pause the video in the middle of this, okay? Because if you're going to do it right, definitely pause it. I want you to go through this and write down 10 different values you see that really speak to you. Like, what are the ones that speak to you wholeheartedly? I'm going to go ahead and say pause here and choose those 10. Great. If you chose those 10, and even if you couldn't find any on the page, you notice that there's that write their own. You're welcome to add your own. Now I want you to take that 10 and I want you to cross out 5 of them. All right, I'm just going to hold on. You go ahead and do that. Go ahead and pause if you need more time. Now that you've gotten your 5 values, I want you to cross out 3 more. Now, you will find that sometimes a lot of different values will overlap. For example, pride and self respect may mean the same things to you, or self expression and creativity. And so you can kind of combine those under one. But at the end of this experiment, I want you to have 2 values that you really see yourself as trying to live up to. Our values are exactly that. They are what we try to live up to and how we judge whether our lives are going the way we want them to or not. So with those 2 values, what I'd love for you to do is take out your phone and put them into a note or put them under your address card. I know on the iPhones, you have your own address card, put it under your notes there so that when you're struggling and you're trying to figure out what's the right thing to do, you'll always have those to reflect back on. The last thing we're going to talk about is the Johari window, which is another great way to better understand ourselves, not only ourselves, but how other people see us. Johari was created by psychologists Joseph Luft and Harrington Ingram. Get it, Joe, Ari, Joseph, Harrington, in 1955 to help people better understand their relationship with themselves and others. They created this very simple window that you can fill out with information. And I'd like you to do this to help yourself with our first presentation. So there's the known to self and the not known to self, and you got known to others and not known to others. So for example, something that's known to self and known to others is that you all know that I am a professor at this school, that I teach classes at this school. So that would be that arena box, right? Now, known to self and not known to others might be something like, well, I think I have some examples in the next couple of windows, so we'll look at those. Originally, the 1955 version was used to place 56 specific adjectives into the boxes, but for our purpose, and here are the adjectives. But for our purposes of better understanding ourselves and by extension others, we will not be focusing on these, but I like to always bring that up. So known to self and known to others, my name, my age, maybe my love of chocolate. Not known to others, my hidden self. This could be stuff like I hate my sister's new boyfriend, but to keep the peace, I don't say anything. Not known to self, it could be stuff like food stuck in my teeth, sock stuck to the back of my jeans. And unknown stuff could be stuff in the future, like who I will vote for in 2024, what I'll be doing on Saturday. But it could also be more simple stuff, or like what I'm having for dinner tonight, as simple as that, or some stuff even I've forgotten. So this is a great way to kind of judge yourself more. While you do the assignment, the first presentation for this class, of course, you don't know what's known to others but not known to yourself unless you ask them. So there are a series of questionnaires that I want you to send out to at least 3 people, but more the merrier, to get you a better idea of understanding who you are, that you're not thinking about your blind self, but also what you're not sharing with other people that maybe they should know. Not so much the fact that you hate your sister's boyfriend, but maybe that you're an artist, or maybe that you have a specific dream, and who knows who can help you out with that. Now, I do teach the Johari window in some of my Navy leadership classes, and I absolutely love the way they teach this because they're looking at it through a leadership lens. And their idea is that we want to shrink that blind spots so that we can be better leaders. A perfect example of this is that I am very quick on my cell phone. I'm very aware of that. Somebody texts me, usually I get back to them. I mean, the longest I would say is an hour and a half, and that's because I'm in class, right? So I get back to people very, very quickly. I type very, very quickly. And a lot of times, instead of making one long post, I'll do several short posts. But you can imagine if I'm your boss and I just sent you 5, 6, or 7 texts all in a row, it can come off a little aggressive. And because I shrunk that blind spot, not realizing that 5, 6, or 7 texts all in a row can come off aggressive, I can better adjust my language and my communication style so that I don't make my sailors or my students anxious by sending that much out. So I'm shrinking this blind spot to become a better leader by being more self aware. And also, there's that unknown by others. Well, guess what? Sometimes we're all going through things. Am I right? And maybe we're having a hard time and we need to take a breath, and that's okay. But if I'm not telling other people, right? How are they going to know that? If I'm upset one day and I'm not telling my family, if I'm not telling my significant other that it has nothing to do with them, I'm just kind of, for some reason, on edge because of traffic, because of something that happened at work, they won't understand that. So as we shrink these areas, the blind spot and the facade, we're going to be better at self discovery. We're going to be better at self disclosure and going to be better communicators altogether. So, hopefully, all of these things will help you better understand yourself, which is really what this portion is about. Please reach out if you have any questions.